Both of these are 125s. That is a TDR Pro, apparently. I don't know if that brand still exists. That is something I've noticed with these Chinese bikes. Often the brand is just, I think, a sticker that gets slapped on out of the factory, and whether or not they are real brands or not. This one is a CF or a Crossfire, and I have looked these up and they do still exist. They've kind of expanded in Australia into that side-by-side market, and they're also selling quads and things, so they are still around. That one was $420 brand new about 12 years ago off eBay, turned up in a box on my doorstep. This one was about $1,000 or $1,100 from a local storefront. So neither of them are running. Well, this one was running when it went into the shed a few years ago. That one was not. So today I'm going to try and get them both fixed up, running, and we're going to go through everything that's gone wrong with them, how they've aged in those 12 years, and the quality of the bikes. Okay, so a bit of history on how we use these bikes. They were just bought to putt around the couple of acres here, and we only used them probably once or twice a month for a couple of hours at most. And then for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, they've really just been sitting in storage in the shed. The pit bike got a bit more use than the quad, but both of them have been riddled with issues ever since we've had them, and neither of them have held up very well either. So quite a lot of rust on the frames, paint flaking, looks like a few seals and gaskets and things are leaking around there as well, which isn't a great sign. I'm going to start off today with the quad because I'm hoping that it's going to be a little bit quicker and easier to get going. The issues that we had with this one, it was just had a plague of electrical issues from day one, right from as soon as it was brought home. All sorts of issues with the kill switch. If you use the kill switch, sometimes then that would trigger something and you then couldn't start it. So we ended up gutting the kill switch on it so that that didn't happen, and you just turn it off with the key. It never really charged the battery, and the battery never had charge, so we spent a lot of time jump starting it. In the end, I wired a Ryobi battery plug into it and we would use that, but it didn't really have the cranking amps if it had been sitting cold for a while to get it running again. There was also some sort of loose connection in the wiring harness somewhere, and if that rattled, you wouldn't be able to start it either. So it went into the shop a few times when it was first bought and under warranty to try and get that fixed. And yeah, those issues just went on and on. So we've got a new battery to put in it. The other issue is it would drop the chain sometimes, which was kind of annoying. Even if it was tensioned up, it would still happen. But this bike, that was probably it. It was mainly around those electrical issues, but this one was ridden a lot less hard and a lot less frequently than the other one. So we've got a new battery. We're going to rewire that in. Hopefully get it running. The reason these bikes are so popular is they're just so cheap, and parts are really cheap for them too, even though you need a lot of parts. But to buy an equivalent bike like this, you'd be looking at least 5 times the price, and for an equivalent sort of pit bike like that new, probably 10 times what I paid. I don't know if you can get them as cheap as what I did back then. But even though parts are cheap, something I find really frustrating is because they're not a specific model, then it's really hard to find parts that fit, and all manufacturers are making different size parts and all that sort of thing. I think this was the fuse that was causing a lot of grief. When the fuse would rattle out in the wiring harness, it wouldn't let you start it. I've also made this up to go on the battery, which is just a female pin connector, and put some ring terminals on that. I'm going to dangle that out the side and zip tie it up so that I can put a solar panel on so it can trickle charge when it's not being used. Like I said, the quad does not charge the battery and it doesn't maintain the battery. So if you leave it for a week or two, it's just dead battery. So hopefully that's going to fix that. Oh, okay. Apparently at some point we've just pulled that fuse out. Bit of bush mechanics. It's good enough for me. Now the ultimate way to tie anything in place, a couple of zip ties. All right, that's connected. All right, judging by that, I'm pretty sure the starter solenoid in this is toast. All right, if I short the solenoid, it should tell me if that's what's wrong. Doesn't seem to be that. Now I remember that I hated that this thing didn't have a kickstart, because I never had this issue getting the other bike started with the kickstart. Just always electrical issues. Not sure if this starter is seized up. I'm gonna pull it out and see if we can get it to spin. It feels quite hot. Gave it a couple of love taps with a screwdriver and have got it spinning, but I don't know if that was what the problem was or if it's having trouble turning the motor over. I don't think it's seized because I was able to turn it when it was in gear. So I think I'm going to put it back together and see how we go. All right, are we going to get any turnover? Well, that's better. All right, it's absolutely pouring fuel out the drain, and because of the quality of this, there's no fuel tap, so I can't stop it. I'm assuming the float valve in there is stuck. That's my guess. Once again, giving it a whack and tightening up that drain bolt as well at the bottom. Seems to have stopped that. I've also taken the air filter off because that's looking a bit seedy. I think it's time to check for spark. A little bit black. It's definitely getting fuel in there though. No spark that I can see. Maybe a new spark plug will fix it. All right, we're getting somewhere. We've got spark. We've got it cranking. Try some of this magical stuff. See if we can get it to fire up. All right, I've pretty much just given up on that quad for now. It's just frustrating, but that pretty much sums up what owning that has been like since day one. It has always had some sort of issue starting, and then every time you go to get it out, it's just problems. So I'm gonna move on to this one. And this one, as I said, it's had lots of issues as well. So some of the things we've had to do, had to replace the clutch lever, had to replace the throttle assembly and the throttle lever. Both of those, it wasn't even from like excessive use or anything like that. It just was so poorly made. The little balls that lock into the mechanism to pull up the throttle body or the clutch lever, they just snapped off. Same in the throttle assembly, the plastics in there just shredded apart. So I had to replace that. Had to rebuild the exhaust because after a couple of hours that just completely fell apart. There was almost no packing in there. So I had to repack that with some new packing and some high tensile rivets. Have had to replace the front sprocket on it multiple times. Both the tires on it that came with it were garbage, didn't last very long at all and started falling apart. So new Kenda tire on the back, new front tire as well. As you can see, it hasn't aged very well, even though it hasn't got that much use on it. Like the seat and all that's falling apart. Stickers have not lasted. Little oil cap filler thing has broken off. Just a lot of issues. The front brake as well. I think within the first week or two, it started leaking. So the seller sent me a new front brake assembly for that. I actually think they're both, the front and brakes have leaked now as well. They've corroded around where the fluid reservoirs are. Breather hoses have fallen off, air filters fallen apart. Things just don't last. Parts are super cheap. Be prepared to buy lots of them, and it can be hard to get the parts that you want as well. The one thing on these bikes that has been good are the engines. I think they're copies of like a Honda engine, and that is the one part that has like held up really well. I don't know how it's going to hold up now, whether this is going to start, but yeah, that's about all I can say as a positive. Is the engines always seem to run when they are running. That one won't start, but when it runs, and this one, same thing. This hasn't been started for about 3 years. filter was half ripped off anyway. Maybe that was the problem. It wants to go. Let's try some of the magic formula. Well, sort of runs. All right, so the bike's fired up, but it's not running. So I've pulled the carb out because I've got a feeling it might be a bit gunked up. So we're just gonna give it a bit of a clean. The jets look completely blocked on this, which is probably why it wasn't running. Can't really blame it being a cheap bike for this, considering it's been sitting in the shed for a while. I don't know if you can see this, but look how gunked up that is in there. I think we're gonna have to wait and see until tomorrow if that has done the trick. So we got the carby all cleaned up yesterday and back on. The gasket that was on it was broken, so I put the new gasket off the new carburetor on. Look at this box of spares, new carby, filter, fuel line, filter, 20 bucks or something like that online. So all I've used from it is the gasket, and I'm gonna chuck this new filter on, and I'm hoping then it should run. Don't think that air filter is very good, but it's probably better than nothing. As I said, the motors on these are pretty solid, so obviously that's running now. Just need to dial that carb in a bit to get it running a bit nicer. I also yesterday cleaned the carb on the quad after pulling it off the pit bike because I thought it might be clogged up as well. I also think the battery, even though it was brand new, isn't that good. Maybe I was cranking it too long, so I've grabbed a car battery and we're going to see if we can get the quad to run now as well. Absolutely rubbish electrics. All right, I'm gonna get these cleaned up, put some fresh oil in them and see if they're gonna ride. So as you can see, both bikes are up and running after quite a bit of hassle, and that pretty much sums up these bikes. You might get a couple of weeks or a couple of months out of a brand new bike, but then things are going to start going wrong. You're going to spend a lot of time fixing stuff. The parts are cheap, but there's just a lot of time and mucking about trying to find the right parts, order them, fixing stuff, like continually fixing stuff to be able to keep riding them. But I mean, they work, you can ride them, they're incredibly cheap. So I mean, on that front, are they worth it? It really depends on your budget. Would I buy Chinese bikes again? No, I wouldn't. Especially not anything with electronics. I think you're definitely much better off getting a used Japanese bike versus a brand new Chinese bike. It's just gonna give you a lot more reliability. But I feel like for 400 and something bucks, brand new at the time, I definitely got my money's worth. But yeah, definitely they're not quality and they're not made to last. They're not particularly powerful or fast. They're rough. You really get what you pay for. So if you are looking at a Chinese bike, I would definitely think twice about it.